Disturbing developments from Robert Mueller's illegitimate runaway witch hunt. This needs to go away. Last week, we first reported that the Justice Department, under the Obama administration, utilized at least one FBI informant to actively spy on multiple people that are associated with the Trump campaign. That includes Sam Clovis and Carter Page. They will be here tonight, along with George Papadopoulos, who recently pled guilty to lying to the FBI after pressure from the Office of the Special Counsel. Now, Sam Clovis recently told Byron York that the informant, FBI spy, used him in order to secure the meeting with Papadopoulos. Meanwhile, former Trump campaign aide Michael Caputo, he also, all three of these guys that were approached by the spy will join us tonight. And, of course, Caputo's claiming that he was approached by multiple government informants during the 2016 election. Imagine for a second if there were spies in Hillary's campaign and she did do a deal for Russian propaganda. Take a look.
Let me tell you something that I know for a fact. This informant, this person that they tried to plan into the campaign and even into the administration, if you believe Axios, he's not the only person that came at the campaign. And the FBI is not the only Obama agency that came at the campaign. I know because they came at me. And I'm looking for clearance from my attorney to reveal this to the public. This is just the beginning.
Now, even former Assistant U.S. Attorney from the Southern District of New York, Andy McCarthy, he's backing up some of these claims in an article entitled "The Obama Administration's Hypocritical Pretext for Spying on the Trump Campaign." In the article, McCarthy writes, quote, "The Obama administration decided to use its counterintelligence powers to spy on the Trump campaign using at least one covert informant, electronic monitoring of communications, and other intelligence gathering tactics. It ignored the norm against deploying such tactics against political opponents, not based on evidence of a Trump-Russia criminal conspiracy, but on speculation about the Trump campaign's Russia contacts and Russian sympathies." How many times have I said they're weaponizing the powerful tools of intelligence? Now, of course, this illicit, this unprecedented spying is now being used by Team Mueller to malign President Trump and everybody else around him. Hours ago, the president raised another pressing concern surrounding the ongoing Mueller witch hunt. He tweeted out, quote, "The 13 angry Democrats, plus people who worked 8 years for Obama, worked on the rigged Russian witch hunt, will be meddling with the midterm elections, especially now that Republicans, stay tough, are taking the lead in the polls. There was no collusion except by the Democrats." Now, the president raises an important concern, especially given the new revelations surrounding what the president is calling, rightly, Spygate. And, of course, the mainstream media, they are providing cover for Team Mueller as they actively are rooting for the special counsel investigation to find something, to find anything on this president. And as you can probably imagine, the media has been doing everything in its power to downplay what is the single biggest abuse of power corruption scandal in American politics and history. And by the way, you have an administration using the Justice Department to spy on an opposing political party during a presidential election, using bought and paid for the other campaign, in this case Hillary Clinton, using her bought and paid for funneled money through a law firm to Fusion GPS to hire a foreign national to get Russian lies that even he says in an interrogatory in Great Britain, maybe 50-50 at best, raw intelligence, to then get a warrant by lying to a FISA judge in an original application and 3 subsequent applications and not telling any of the judges that Hillary paid for it. Take a look at how the biased press is trying to brush aside this huge, massive national abuse of power corruption scandal.
I have an aversion to the use of the word spy, but let's just, for the sake of discussion, use that term, which conventionally means the use of tradecraft, using a formally trained case officer who would mask identity, who would attempt to recruit. So none of the classical attributes of spycraft, if I can use that term, were present here. This is the most benign form of information gathering. So to characterize it as a spy or Spygate is course, part of the narrative. And it's directly antithetical to what I actually said.
At various times, Trump has seemed attracted to conspiracy theories. There's obviously much remarked upon looseness with the truth and the lies, et cetera, et cetera. But the obsession with conspiracy theories and tall tales, as you say, Joe, dates back for a long time. I think the point right now, though, is that he's using them to a particular kind of political effect.
Heileman's a liberal hack, and Clapper is a known liar. We're going to have much more on the spying scandal and the complicit media's cover-up all throughout the show. Now, let's turn to a story that left many on the left totally embarrassed over the weekend. Remember this picture circulated online showing many illegal immigrants being detained in a chain-link cage? And, of course, many on the left became outraged, just outraged, quickly accusing the Trump administration of massive human rights violations. You have activist Sean King said that children of immigrants being held in cages like dogs. And Linda Sarsour, remember her? Oh, yeah, she chimed in, hashtagging, "We are our children." What Sarsour, King, and yes, your friends in the media failed to realize is, let's put those pictures back up. Those pictures were taken in 2014. Barack Hussein Obama was your president. And back then, they voiced zero concern about Obama's detention policies. Now, meanwhile, others on the left use these photos, of course, to attack President Trump. Whoopsie daisy. Take a look.
As the president correctly points out, the photo is from 2014. But that tweet highlights just how heated this whole discussion has become surrounding parents and children who cross the border.
There's some renewed scrutiny that some children are being separated from their parents at the border. It is a policy the Trump administration has defended.
President Trump tweeted about one of his favorite topics this morning, immigration. This, as his policies are facing major criticism, writing in part, quote, "Dems must agree to wall and new border protection for good of country. Bipartisan bill!" exclamation point. The president has been taking serious heat for his immigration policies recently, particularly his policy of separating families in detention.
There's actually a new policy from the administration right now to separate families. These are families who made the courageous decision, a hard decision, to leave behind everything that they had, their families, their communities, their belongings, out of fear to come to the United States.
Now, finally tonight, the reboot of the sitcom Roseanne has been canceled. This after Roseanne Barr made some really incendiary, pretty appalling comments on Twitter about the appearance of Obama aide Valerie Jarrett. Earlier today, she did apologize, but the show is now over. We're going to have more reaction later in the show.
So joining us now, South Carolina Congressman Trey Gowdy, chairman of the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee, also member of the House Intel Committee. And you were one of those who saw some of the background documents related to this issue of whether or not there was a spy or an informant in the campaign late last week. Anything you can share on a broad scale about what went down there?
I think there are two things important to understand. Number one, the source of President Trump's frustration. Brennan said he should be in the dustbin of history. Comey said impeachment's too good of a remedy. Clapper doesn't like him. Loretta Lynch said call it a matter, not an investigation. Schiff said he had evidence of collusion before we even began the investigation. And 60 Democrats have voted to impeach him before Bob Mueller has come up with a single solitary finding. That's what's got him frustrated. What should have him heartened is the fact that Chris Wray, Rod Rosenstein, and all the senior folks at DOJ now were all Trump appointees. So here's what's fair to ask. What did the FBI do? When did they do it? What was the factual predicate upon which they took whatever actions they took? And against whom were they directed? But remember, Martha, it was President Trump himself who said, number one, I didn't collude with Russia, but if anyone connected with my campaign did, I want the FBI to find that out. It looks to me like the FBI was doing what President Trump said, I want you to do, find it out. He's not the target. So when Schiff and others don't make that clear, they're doing a disservice to our fellow citizens. He's not the target.
But this raises the question that the president raised in this one of those tweets. There were a lot of them, and which we talked about quite a bit here last week. Is if that were the case, why didn't they give him a little briefing? So here's what we found out. We do have somebody who asked some questions of George Papadopoulos. We do have somebody who's asked questions of Carter Page. Here's what you need to know.
I think defensive briefings are done a lot, and why the Comey FBI didn't do it, I don't know. But Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein have at least made it clear to us Donald Trump was never the target of the investigation. He's not the current target of the investigation. Now, keep in mind, that can all change depending on what a witness says. But as of now, I think Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein are stunned whenever people think Trump is the target of their investigation. I'll leave it up to them how to brief the president or how to brief his lawyers. Was that point of view that you're talking about right now, was that strengthened when you went into this briefing last week? Yes. I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump. All right. So given the things that were over here on your right hand, all the frustrations, do you think it's problematic the way the president is tweeting about this all the time? Because he feels like he needs to vent. He's got to get his message out there. Is it legally problematic in your mind what he's doing? I think anytime you create prior statements, you give Mueller or other folks a chance to question you on them and ask what was your factual basis? Why did you say that? The president should have access to the best legal minds in the country, and I think he should take advantage of those. And he's got some really good communicators that are on his staff and at his call. If I were his lawyer, and I never will be, I would tell him to rely on his lawyers and his comms folks. All right, here's one of them, Rudy Giuliani, speaking with Bill Hemmer over the holiday weekend. Watch this.
What's wrong with the government trying to figure out what Russia was up to?
Nothing wrong with the government doing that. Everything wrong with the government spying on a candidate of the opposition party. That's a Watergate, a Spygate. I mean, and without any warning to him. And now, to compound that, to make it into a criminal investigation, Bill, that's why this is a rigged investigation.
There are two things wrong with what the former U.S. attorney said. Number one, no one knows whether this is a criminal investigation. Mueller was told to do a counterintelligence investigation into what Russia did. Number two, President Trump himself, in the Comey memo, said, if anyone connected with my campaign was working with Russia, I want you to investigate it. And it sounds to me like that is exactly what the FBI did. I think when the president finds out what happened, he's going to be not just fine, he's going to be glad that we have an FBI that took seriously what they heard. He was never the target. Russia is the target. So it sounds to me as if you would advise him that there's no problem with him sitting down with Robert Mueller. Oh, absolutely not. I have always said, I think you ought to sit down with Bob Mueller. You've told us publicly there was no collusion. You've told us publicly there was no obstruction. Say in private what you've said publicly. Limit the scope to exactly what the Mueller memo is. But if he were my client, and I'd say if you've done nothing wrong, then you need to sit down and tell Mueller what you know. All right. There was one judge who said that the scope was all over the place. Do you feel comfortable with the scope of this investigation? And do you feel like your committee has been shared with to the extent that exists, that the scope exists? I'm not sure what the scope of the Mueller probe is, but I know this. Rosenstein is the one who created the memo. Right. It's not Bob Mueller's fault. Have you seen that memo? I have. I've seen the memo that you've seen also. The other memo some of my colleagues want to see is a more narrow, the one that basically says investigate Russia and anything related to it. And as a throwaway line at the end, and of course, if there's any criminality, look at that too. I mean, we run towards the criminality, but I would think everyone would want to know what Russia did. So I mean, with whom, if anyone, is the second part. The first question is, what did Russia do? We'll see. Trey, thank you very much. Good to see you, Congressman.